Yo guys, what is up? Moxie here with a Path of Exile 2 video, and today I wanted to cover some starters for Ranger. Now, I played Ranger in the playtest that I was invited to, so I've already leveled this character. I've got some experience with what it's good at and what its weaknesses are, and today I'm going to be talking about two kind of pathways that we can go. That one is going to be like a frenzy stacking Deadeye. You can use your skill of choice, Spiral Volley, Rain of Arrows, and the other is going to be a poison Pathfinder. And I'm going to have a link to a Google Doc that has a bunch of tips and stuff like that for leveling that you can look at for early gem setups, mid game gem setups, and there is some late game stuff, but obviously really focusing on just getting through the campaign, and then obviously late game we're gonna have to figure out later, but I do have a lot to talk about today. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Let's get right into it. So the skill that I'm most interested in and that I will be building my character for is going to be called Spiral Volley. This is a T13 Ranger skill. It wasn't in any of the time that I played, and it wasn't in any of their footage, so this is something that just got added, which I think is pretty exciting because one, it sounds really powerful, and also it doesn't look like it would have any time to balance it if it is really strong. But this Spiral Volley loads your bow with a volley of arrows, and you fire them in a circle as you spin forward, firing directly at targets if possible. So you don't need to aim with this. It's just going to go to targets. When you click the button, it consumes frenzy charges to cause the arrows to deal more damage and chain to other targets. So a chain is going to hit a target, and then it's going to bounce to another target, and each target can only be hit once. So with this setup, we should have a pretty interesting skill where if you ever played Demon Hunter, for example, in Diablo 3, where you're able to just spin around and send a bunch of arrows out, I think this could be really cool. We're going to want a bunch of frenzy charges so that we can build up basically frenzy charges to cast its frenzy buffs, which are 20% more damage per frenzy charge consumed and 100% more damage if a frenzy charge was consumed. And this skill already has pretty good looking base damage, plus we're gonna be firing out 25 arrows, so this is looking pretty neat to me. Skill that really interested me is Rain of Arrows. Now you could build this for poison, you could build it for Deadeye, but it gets 100% more arrows if a frenzy charge was consumed, and it fires 50% more arrows per frenzy charge consumed. This is really interesting because the other skill I think we're going to be using as a mobbing skill where we can go around, but it can only hit one target with these arrows, versus Rain of Arrows can all of its arrows come down on a single enemy. So I think we're going to have two setups where we have Rain of Arrows as our main single target skill, popping a bunch of arrows down, and Spiral Volley as our kind of AoE skill. And these two together, both building around frenzy charges and flat damage for our arrows, is looking very cool to me. Now, the reason I'm thinking about Deadeye is because of these two nodes. Avidity allows us, whenever we would gain a frenzy charge, we instead gain max number of frenzy charges, and all of our skills are going to benefit from frenzy charges. But with Thrilling Chase, benefits from consuming frenzy charges for our skills have a 50% chance to be doubled. So all of a sudden, that skill that got 100% increased damage from using a frenzy charge now gets 200% increased damage from using a frenzy charge. Or Rain of Arrows, which was fired and gets 100% more arrows, now it gets 200% more arrows. These are going to be a massive way to scale our damage, and Deadeye is just going to be the best at generating all of these frenzy charges. The other thing that Deadeye's got going on for it that looks really cool is Gathering Winds, which gives us Tailwind. Now, Tailwind is going to give us move speed, it's going to give us action speed, and it's also going to give us 150% increased evasion rating. And we are able to pick up Wind Ward, which is going to give us less damage taken per Tailwind. There's some pretty interesting setups that we can use to get really fast attack speed, and keep up these Tailwind stacks, which is going to mitigate a lot of the damage that's going to be incoming to us. And obviously, we do lose all of our stacks on Tailwind when we get hit, but we're going to be building a lot of evasion so that we're not getting hit that often. Even if an attack does hit us, it'll evade. And then when we do lose our stacks, which we definitely will be doing, we're going to be able to generate them back quickly. And this is kind of the concept of what I'm going to be building towards. I also think it'd be pretty interesting to set up Rain of Arrows and give it added chaos damage and poison chance to stack up maximum amount of poison pretty instantly on an enemy. And we'll be talking about Poison Pathfinder as well, but I just kind of wanted to go over that. So now let's talk about skill tree. So our skill tree, kind of regardless of what we're going to be going on So our skill tree, kind of regardless of what we're going to be going on Pathfinder, we're going to be taking a pretty similar route to get some starting things, which are going to be really important. We're going to go up this right side and pick up Honed Instincts for increased attack speed, accuracy, and dexterity. Then we're going to want to pick up the Wellspring and Hailed Traveler nodes. This is just going to give us mana recovery from our flask and life recovery from our flask. Flasks are super important for early game because they're basically our only source of sustain. Then we're going to go over to Master Fletcher to get some more extra projectile speed and some extra attack speed. And then we're probably going to go down and get some flask stuff just for some extra survivability early. Now, there are some interesting nodes, such as the projectile damage over here. I'm thinking about skipping that and working our way. If we're going like Deadeye, we're going to be using lightning arrow skills early, so we'll pick up elemental for increased elemental damage. If we're going to go poison, we'll skip that node and go for stacking toxins and this toxic duration. These nodes are all pretty interesting for projectiles dealing more damage to close enemies or more damage to further enemies. Kind of depends on the playstyle. I'm probably going to be going for close damage, to be honest. And then what we're going to be able to do is, if enemies do get close, we're just going to be able to truck them with our damage. If we're going lightning, we're going to pick up catalyst for increased elemental damage and fizz damage from hits taken as random element. This will already give us a fair bit of like fizz damage mitigation. And then going up here for more projectile damage and increased attack speed. And this is kind of the setup that I think I'm going to go on either, like regardless if we're going poison or not poison. Grabbing all of those things will be great because poison scales off of projectile damage, the damage that we deal, and our lightning arrows are also going to scale off of projectile damage and elemental damage. So all of those things are going to be really nice. For our early gem setup, if you're going to be going Deadeye, we're going to pick Lightning Arrow. Lightning Arrow is looking pretty strong as a starter. It gives us pretty good single target, but also it chains to enemies. We're going to pair that with multiple projectiles, which will make it fire more projectiles, hit more enemies, and added lightning damage for even more just raw damage on this thing. We're also going to be using Lightning Rod. That's like a pretty early second skill that you can get. This fires a arrow into the ground, and then if you shoot at chaining arrows into it, it's going to chain lightning bursts to nearby enemies. So your rotation super early on is going to be firing your Lightning Rod down and then firing your lightning arrow at it. We're going to use Volley to get more lightning rods when we firing, and area effect, so that those like explosions that are going to be happening from it are going to have more area. We're also going to use Vine Arrow. Vine Arrow is going to be paired with Encumbrance. This fires poison or like poison pods, and with a Encumbrance, these poison pods are going to be slowing, and we're going to increase their slow effect for a little bit more crowd control and corrosion so that we break armor. Armor is something that mitigates physical damage reduction. Early on, we're going to be doing a mix of lightning and physical damage, and our enemies having less armor is going to make the physical version or portion of our damage deal more damage. We're also going to get Herald of Thunder. Herald of Thunder is going to allow us to have lightning bolts coming down and hitting enemies whenever we're killing them. But the big thing is it gives us a buff that grants us 1 to 10 added lightning damage. Flat damage, when you see something that says like plus something to something damage, is really valuable, and you're going to want that anywhere you can get it, and Herald of Thunder gives us that as a persistent, always up buff. And we can link Clarity to get more mana regen, and Herbalism so that we get increased flask recovery. Flasks are going to be really important for survivability early on before we get other forms of sustain. Then we're going to use Stormcaller's Arrow. This is our big shocking arrow. It fires an arrow that embeds into the ground, and then after delay, the arrow will call down lightning strikes that have a high shock chance. This high shock chance is going to be really valuable, and we're going to pair Conduction with that and Lasting Shock. This gives it a 100% increased chance to shock, and Lasting Shock means these shocks have more duration. Shock in Path of Exile is a multiplier to our damage. If we're firing at enemies that are going to be shocked, we're just going to be dealing more damage. So this is going to be a setup to kind of increase our damage. And then we're going to use Barrage. Barrage is basically a spell that you can cast that whenever you click it and then fire a skill, that skill will repeat multiple times. Just a little easy buff that we can have on our bar for extra damage. And then lastly, I think we're going to want Temporal Chains. Temporal Chains is a curse that slows enemies down. It makes their action speed and movement speed slower. It should stack with the slow from Vine Arrow. So we're going to have slows on slows. And then we're going to pair this with Heightened Curse. So we've got even more slow. And then Hex Bloom, so that if we kill the enemy that's slowed, that slow will spread to nearby enemies. And this should really help us kind of keep our distance from enemies. Spacing is going to be super important and not getting ran at by like tons of enemies. So I'm prioritizing a little bit of CC so that we can keep up our damage and keep shooting at enemies. I do want to note that I think Snipe is technically going to be our best bossing skill for like any kind of ranger that you want to play. This does a bunch of damage early on. It gets a 300% critical bonus, so any bit of crit chance that we can go is great, but I wouldn't rely on it critting early. This with window of opportunity is going to make snipe, if we release it in the perfect window, give it 50% more damage, and with brutality support it's going to get 35 more physical. I don't know if we'll have like any added sources of elemental yet, so don't go brutality if you've added elemental, but if you don't have like added elements, or if you do have like a fair bit of added fizz, this is just going to make it deal 35% more physical damage, which is what the skill inherently does. And I think this is going to be a really strong setup, just to chunk bosses down. There's some really good gameplay of snipe just deleting things. And so that's probably what I'm going to pick up for bossing. But mainly, like the rest of the time, we're going to be using our lightning skills. Now, for very early on Deadeye, we're actually going to go for the increased damage, and firing an additional arrow, I think is going to be a really great pickup, because, you know, we're going to be using like lightning arrows and projectiles that fire like one projectile. As soon as we pick up rain of arrows and pick up like spiral, which is going to be sending out tens of arrows, adding one arrow to like 39 arrows is not any good anymore. So then we'll do a little respec and grab the movement speed stuff. I think you could technically grab the movement speed stuff early, but I do think that rushing the extra projectile is going to give us a really nice head start for damage. Picking up an extra projectile, if we're only firing one, is literally 100% more damage, and so that should be really nice. Now once we get things that generate or benefit from frenzy charges, we're going to want to pick up our frenzy charge stuff and get our tailwind going so that extra survivability and movement speed. And this is kind of my final like build skill plan. Now with rain of arrows and the like spiral shot, unfortunately this planner doesn't have spiral shot, so I can't fit that in here, but I think we're going to set up like rain of arrows with like a cast on critical setup with sniper's mark. Sniper's mark gives us a frenzy charge whenever we crit. We're firing a bazillion arrows. Even if we have like 10% crit chance, we're still going to be proccing sniper's mark, which gives us a frenzy charge, and so that should feel pretty nice, because we're going to really want good frenzy sustain to be, you know, casting all of our abilities with the frenzy multipliers that's going to give us. I'm planning on putting pin on rain of arrows for the ability to just stun lock basically enemies, keep them in plays. And if we are going to use rain of arrows as a single target skill, there is some neat things that we could do, such as like, for example, going concentrated effect. A concentrated effect will give us more area damage but less area of effect. And this will be like double bonuses for rain of arrows, because we're going to be hitting more damage in an area, but that area will be condensed. So if we're condensing it more on one elite, then there's just more arrows hitting one target. I mean, this will be a really powerful support for rain of arrows that I am excited to try out. I think it'll be really strong for, like, you know, our single target damage. And then we're going to set up some other things, such as like Herald of Thunder. We'll probably be using this regardless, just for the added flat and some AoE. Vine Arrow is still going to be a staple of the build, I think, to give us increased armor break, corrosion. Break posture is going to daze enemies when it breaks their armor. Multiple projectiles to fire more vine arrows, and encumbrance so that the slow of vine arrow is even stronger. I do think it'd be interesting to throw in some tornado shots. Tornado shot will multiply our projectiles out. So if we're firing 25 projectiles in, every projectile is going to get nova'd out. And so that could multiply our projectiles even more. And we could set up tornado shot with some shock chance and added lightning and conduction so that we have the ability to shock enemies. Shocking enemies is going to be important because it is a multiplier, and it's one of the few multipliers that we're going to be able to grab pretty easily. We're going to be looking for like added lightning on our bows, and then setting up like blasphemy as a curse aura with temporal chains and heightened curse. So anything that gets close to us is going to get slowed. I think will help a lot with our survivability as well. Now I do have my full setup and like early tree and end game tree for the poison ranger or poison pathfinder. I'll leave this link down in the comments. But one of the big things for poison that you're going to want to set up is going for a despair setup with decaying hex, chaotic freeze, and hex bloom. The reason this is going to be so powerful on poison ranger is because any curse that you link to decaying hex will allow that curse to then dot enemies, and then with chaotic freeze, any enemy that is dotted by non-element damage, aka decaying hex, will then get freeze buildup from any chaos damage. So all the hits that we're doing against enemies will then be freezing them, and then with Hex Bloom that should proliferate to other nearby enemies. So we should be getting a bunch of poison damage, but also freezing all the enemies that are getting poisoned by us. And I'm really, really curious to how this is going to work. I think poison is going to be a little bit more comfy if you're like deciding between Pathfinder or Deadeye. I think Deadeye will have more damage, but I think Pathfinder will be more cozy. You're going to have more ways to heal yourself, more survivability with your flash sustain, and more just kind of general quality of life with poison proliferating. But I think they're both going to be really strong. And honestly, I think I'm partially going to be deciding on what I go once I get into the game and how the different skills are feeling. Guys, it's going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. I will be like updating this build and this document as I go once we get into the game. But yeah, that's it for the video. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Peace.